If you are right with God in your heart, and you're doing what God called you to do, then you keep doing what He called you to do until He tells you to do something else. And that was my conviction. Lord, I'm going to keep doing what you said do. If you want me to do something else, tell me, but until then, this is what I'm going to do. Well, when I was 18, I had finished high school and I was going to college, and I thought, my grandfather, I'd only seen him twice before. He'd been a Pentecostal preacher for many, many years, and he was in his 70s at this time. And so I thought, well, I need to go talk to my granddad for some reason. So I went down and I spent a week with him. And I told him, I said, I just want to listen to you. He'd been a pastor all these years. So we would sit on his screened-in back porch in Solace City, North Carolina.
Okay.
And I would just ask him questions. I mean, just all kind of questions. And he would sit there and talk, and we'd go eat lunch or something, come back and sit down. And so in the process of all the things he said to me, he said this. He says, when you're going through a hard time, he said, put it this way. If God tells you to head toward a brick wall, you head for the wall, and when you get there, God will make a hole for it. So I chuckled like that and didn't think anything about it. But on my way home, thinking about that, I can hardly tell you. It's like God said to me, here's what He said, obey God and leave all the consequences to Him. And I want you to remember that. Yes, Lord, I will.
Wow. So, not to start here, but you just said in a tough time. There's been a few tough times that you've lived through. You've been through a couple of them. We've discussed some of them. I'm gonna ask you a tough thing, and trust God, obey God, and leave the consequences. You got a really horrible phone call one morning from your former wife. Tell me about that.
Well, it was a surprise, but not in a way it wasn't. She had left me for quite some time. And people would say, well, how can you preach if your wife's gone? I say, well, because God hadn't told me to do anything else.
Yeah.
And so that went on for a while until finally she decided that she wanted a divorce. And she didn't have anything critical necessarily to say about me. And, you know, people always suspect things. And so finally she decided, I just don't want to live with you any longer, and I want a divorce. So when that word got out, you know, people said, well, you can't be a pastor of a church and with your wife gone. And so I'd get down to pray, and the Lord would just tell me, you keep doing what I've called you to do until I tell you to do something else. And so finally when our attorney called me and told me it was going to happen, and where should he leave the papers, and I told him, I put the phone down, and I had this overwhelming sense of peace.
My goodness.
I thought, God, I've obeyed you. This is where we are, and I'm going to trust you. And naturally, some folks in the church got upset, and I told them, I said, well, you know what? God hadn't told me to do anything but what I'm doing. So I intend to do that until He tells me to do something else. And so that went on, and the word got out, and it was on television. Folks, we had people calling us from London and this, that, and the other, and said, we're just going to keep doing what God said do. And then I got a lot of encouragement from people who said, well, you don't. That wasn't your decision. You keep doing what you're doing. So finally, it was all over, and I look back and see how God protected me through that. And I had no animosity. I wasn't. It wasn't my idea. And so she divorced me, and I remember a critical moment in that when we were standing in the attorney's office, and they were trying to decide what they wanted, and this, that, and the other. And so finally, the Lord reminded me of a statement I had heard before and read. And I said, yes, Lord. So I said, here's the deal. So take it or leave it. So my attorney did. And so in 5 minutes, they said, okay. And so I never felt like I really divorced her. She asked for it. I responded to it. What else could I do? And I felt like I had obeyed God by responding, and I knew that he would take care of me.
Your response was to just not change anything you were doing before.
Right.
Would you give that advice to others? You've weathered a storm that most of the time sinks the ship. I look around here and the ship's still sailing along here. At 85, you've never had, the response to your broadcast, these buildings, the grounds. You just kept doing what God told you to do. Is that advice for divorced folks that are watching this?
If you are right with God in your heart and you're doing what God called you to do, then you keep doing what he called you to do until he tells you to do something else. Yeah. And that was my conviction. Lord, I'm going to keep doing what you said do. If you want me to do something else, tell me. But until then, this is what I'm going to do. Now, of course, everybody in the church wasn't happy about all that. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, I'm not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. If you have to leave, then I fully understand your conviction, but I'm going to keep doing what God called me to do, and he hadn't told me to leave.
If XYZ high-profile contemporary of yours wrote you a letter and said you need to resign, what would have your response have been to that?
Well, I have some of those. And
can I see them later? No, I'm kidding. I
said, well, thank you very much. I understand your conviction. And probably years ago, I probably would have agreed with you. But I'm doing what God's called me to do today, and that's all I'm responsible for. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your prayers.
Obey God. Leave all the consequences to him.
Correct.
When Andy left your church, how was that statement? Are you glad you had that statement in your heart
Absolutely.
At that point?
I thought, well, he's made this decision. And God, you've always taken care of me and shown me what to do. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. Yeah. In 6 months, we had that many people back. Yeah. And we've never slowed down. He started his ministry, and he's got a big thing going. And so he learned from me to obey God and leave all the consequences to him. So now we have all this going on. And I've just seen God work in every single circumstance. Yeah. If you obey him, you can't lose. Absolutely. How can you lose the God who created it all?
Yeah. That's what I've always thought. I thought, man, if you're doing something in faith and with the right heart and really believe, how can you fall? Even though sometimes it might look to others like you have fallen, you don't, because the faithfulness of God takes everything and makes everything good for your,
What it feels like, Dr. Stanley, is that sometimes I think that audiences that view people on television think they don't ever have no problems, there's just nothing going on. They never have any issues to deal with. And they don't really know what it's like to be,
normal.
Who I am in the viewing audience. And they think that, but, you've dealt with some of the most painful things that can be dealt with. And at 85, most of the time you're sitting there smiling and you're content.
I am.
You are enjoying life. One question I have about your grandfather. You mentioned briefly that he was a Pentecostal preacher. So you have at least some roots from the Pentecostal side of your world.
Deep roots.
Deep roots. Yeah. And then when I hear a story like, the word September gets written across, your vision and all of that. That sounds a bit Pentecostal. Are you Baptist-costal? What? How do you describe yourself?
Well, I became president of the Southern Baptist Convention, the biggest convention they ever had. And one of the criticisms was I was Pentecostal. Yeah. I said, well, if obeying God means I'm Pentecostal, count me in.
Aww.
Nice.
At TBN, our mission is to use every available means to reach as many individuals and families as possible with the life-changing gospel of Jesus Christ.
Thank you for helping make the gospel of grace go around the world.
Without you, we couldn't do it. God bless you.